Okay, so here we have basic disc brake setup on the front of a Honda. This happens to be our 2013 Accord EX. So I'm going to show you some of the various components that we have on the brake system, and then I'm going to disassemble it and we'll get a little bit closer to it. So this is the caliper assembly here. The caliper itself, inside here is the piston that does all the work. Through here you can see pads, which we'll see in a minute. This piece here to here is the mounting bracket. This was what bolts to our steering knuckle, and this is the platform that everything works off of. Then you can see here's our bleeder nipple right there for changing fluid and bleeding air out. You have our banjo fitting where our brake line comes in, runs up. We've got one attachment point here, and if you let me pivot up for a second, and you can see where it comes up into the main part of the chassis. Our flexible line ends here. We go to a full metal line at this point for strength and durability. So the only part we're going to have the rubber is going to be this one section right through here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take this apart, and I'll show you the various parts as we disassemble. Just two bolts hold the caliper to our mounting bracket, and generally what we're going to do is we're just going to take this guy and flip it right up out of the way. If we're just putting pads on here, this is as far as we need to go, and then our pads pop right out. And you can see here's the pads, inner and outer, and they just pop loose. Okay, and here you can see this is the wear indicator, and this is the guy that makes that horrible screeching sound when you get low on the pads. We have the two mounting tabs here and here. They mount into the bracket right there, and we also have an anti-noise shim right there that helps with vibration dampening. And pop the other one out too. And again, you can see a shim on the back. Okay, and you can see from the factory this one already had some anti-seize back there designed to dampen the vibration. And that's the chief noise generator on brakes, is vibration of the pads. Okay, these two clips, one here, one at the top, these guys where the pad clips into, these also help stop the pads from making noise and vibrating inside the bracket itself. This is the part that the non-technicians tend to leave out, throw away, especially when they get damaged. The reason those guys are so important, put this guy back in here. Now watch what happens without those in there. See how much movement there is? Up and down, in and out both. So we hit a bump, these guys will rattle. If we hit the brakes, they're going to be thrust one direction or another. If we change direction, like reverse, it's going to click, and then it'll stop, and then when we go forward, it's going to click again. Big source of noise for our customers on brake jobs that aren't done to the normal factory specs. Okay, so here we have another key component to our braking system, and this is the slider pin. Okay, this guy, as you notice, has some grease on it. It's in a channel through here. This guy moves back and forth. This is critical for this type of caliper where it only has one piston. This caliper has to move back and forth as we apply the brakes. If these guys are not lubricated, you're going to have a caliper that sticks and you're going to get uneven pad wear. Generally, we end up wearing the inside pad because the piston moves, but it doesn't shift the caliper over and put some wear on the outside pad. So if you take your brakes apart and you see only one pad is worn, it's generally going to be the inside one, and it's because these guys are stuck. Okay, and it just slides right back in, and there you go. These boots are something to watch out for. They will tear and they will age out because of the heat generated by the brakes. This is a guy that's very important to make sure is in good shape, because if you don't, this guy's not going to be free floating like that. And that is a key thing. Okay, so if we were going to change the rotor, we've got to get this bracket off, which means this caliper has to be removed from this bracket and has to be supported. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull the caliper bracket off. This is what we have to do if we're going to change a rotor. If we're not going to change the rotor, we may or may not be able to leave this in place if we're turning the rotor. It just depends on which machine we're using. But generally, it's a better idea to just go ahead and pull it out of the way. Now, the first thing we have to make sure we do is support our caliper. You can support it a lot of different ways. There are hooks specially designed for this. You can use wire, whatever you want to use. The key here is to make sure that this guy is not hanging by the hose. We never want to hang by this hose. Now I'm going to take this bracket off to make sure we got plenty of room. If we let this dangle by the hose, you're going to damage this hose at one of these crimp connections. Okay, so that's a big no-no. And we don't want to just set it over here on the top, which is what a lot of guys do. Because if we do that and we bump this and it falls off, now it's falling and being jerked to a stop by the hose. So that's a real bad idea. Okay, so we just pull these two big guys out. And yes, I loosened everything ahead of time. And since this is a brand new car, everything spins out by hand. All right, and there's our bracket. Okay, so nice solid piece. Notice that the threads are in this bracket itself. So if we, for some reason, somebody's taken this apart and put it back on and they cross-threaded these guys, you just replace this one part. You can get this separate from the caliper, and we don't have to replace our knuckle. You can see the bolts just slide through the hole. That saves us potential for a lot of money, because you really don't want to have to tap these guys and put a time cert in there, something like that. So it's much easier, just replace this guy. And you can see now, if there's a different angle, you can see where the pads sit, and you can see the sliders. Okay? All right. Now, with this way, now we have full access to the rotor, and if we're going to remove the rotor, we just take the two screws out here on the side, take them loose, and then we can pull the rotor off. All right, so here's the front of our rotor. Obviously the wheel studs, the hub center where our wheel fits. You can see the hardware here and here. So these guys, you're going to need something like this. This is an impact driver. You're never going to get this out with a regular screwdriver. So I haven't touched these, so let's see how it goes. You basically preload this guy. So in this case, coming off, it's left. And you just give it a sharp rap, and it came loose, and we got lucky. But again, this is because this car has no miles on it. They generally will not come off anywhere near that easy on a car that you're actually going to have to turn the rotors on. And there you go. There are the two pieces of hardware. Okay. Now, a lot of people were asked, do we need to put these back in? The official answer, of course, is yes. If Honda put something on there from the factory, we should put it back on there when we're done. But the easy answer for us as techs is when our wheel is on here, this guy's not going anywhere. Okay? So notice there's almost no play right there between the rotor and the hub. And I have never seen a problem on a car where these have been left out. So it's fine if you leave them out. If they get too damaged pulling them apart, that's fine. Go ahead and leave them out. All right, and then we're just going to pull the rotor off. There it is, and there's our hub.